we've constructed our domain model. We've got a JSON representation of the data that's going to be flowing in from the data feed, and we've got a mapping which is going to take that data and shape the data that's coming from the feed and put it into the domain model. We actually need something that will actually make that process happen, and the way that we do that is to use a microflow. So I'm going to create a new microflow. Let's go add microflow, and let's give it the name crime import. I'll do. I'll click OK. Now the way that this is going to work is that we know in our domain model we've set this up so that there's going to be a sort of input values of a latitude and a longitude. So we'll have this sort of incoming parameter, and that's going to be our input object. So I'm just going to select that here, input object, and it's going to be called input. So we've got that longitude and that latitude coming in to our microflow. And the next thing we need to do is actually sort of initiate the REST call. In fact, we're going to do, there's two parts to this. Basically, we're going to call the REST service to actually get the data, and then we're actually going to save that data into our sort of through the input relationship into our crimes domain model and into the entities that make up that model. So step one, we'll create the JSON call. Now there's a widget over here which is call REST service. That's the one we're going to use. So I'm going to drop that on there like that, and we'll open it up. We need to configure it a little bit. So we'll open it up, and we're going to do most of our work on the general and the response tab in here. So the first thing that we'll need to do is we'll need to drop in the actual URL that we're going to use to retrieve the feed. Now we've seen that already, so I'm just going to copy it in and paste it into this field here. I tap on edit, and then I can paste it in. Now it's quite wide here, but we can actually see that there are two values that we supply, the latitude and the longitude. And the way that we can do this is we want these values to be changeable. They're going to come in through the form that we're going to construct later on. So we're going to turn these into parameters. So I'm just going to do that, and I'm going to very carefully just delete that number and put a parameter in. And the way that we do that is we use braces and a number. So that's going to be my first parameter. In other words, the value is going to be inserted at this point into this string. And now I do a similar thing for the second parameter, the longitude, which is going to look like that. lng equals 2. Now down in the bottom half of this dialog box, what we'll do is we'll actually sort of align one of the data values with a value 1 and one of the data values with a value 2. So those values will actually be inserted into that string before the JSON call goes off and gets the data that matches that sort of latitude and longitude. So I'm going to tap on new. Now if I type $, what it will show us will be input, and we can pick the latitude. So what we want is we want the sort of the latitude to be sort of inserted into that spot there where it says 1. But there's a type issue here, which of course is that, and the hint is in the error message that's being generated by Mendix. Latitude, we've created that so it's a decimal number, but when it's going to be inserted into this string, obviously it will have to be a string. So we'll need to convert it into a string. Now this is pretty straightforward because there is a function to do this. It's called toString. So I'm just going to wrap this all up in a function call. There it is, toString. It'll take our decimal number and convert it into a string so it can be inserted at that point. Now if I click OK, you can see what's basically going on here. That expression, that value, will be inserted into the point where it says 1, in other words, into this URL up here. So we just do the same thing again. toString, open bracket, $, bring up the input field, and of course at this point we're going to insert the longitude like that. Close the bracket. OK. So that's the the nature of the string that will be passed and will be used to actually pull data in. Now we're just going to handle the response tab here. What do we actually want to do with this? Well, we're going to, that value is going to come in and it's going to be quite a complicated structure. And this is where we're going to use that import mapping that we set up earlier on. So we're going to go apply import mapping. We're going to say which mapping should we apply. Obviously it's the crime import mapping that we created. And then we say, where are we going to, what parameter are we going to use with that mapping? Well, it's going to be input, because that's what we said. We would have that input that consists of that sort of longitude and that latitude value. So we've got the mapping, the value that's going to come in. It's going to, those values are going to be sort of saved using the mapping into the domain model because we've said commit. Now there are other choices here. We could actually, if we wanted to, save the value in a variable. And if we did that, that would mean that it would be available to us to use in this microflow, or if we wanted to, we could use it on the page in some way. But with these settings, that's absolutely fine. We know the value's coming in and we've said that we're going to commit, so the value's going to be saved. So that's the microflow created. So the next step is to basically create the interface. We've created the domain model, we've got our mapping, we've got our microflow that will call and actually pull the data from a feed. The next step is to actually construct an app, construct some pages so that we've got a form and a way to actually run this microflow.